Daye, and I will be emceeing this session. Our event today is in keeping with the COVID-19 containment guidelines set by the Korean government. We were unable to invite a large crowd offline to the venue, but I believe that we will have a very meaningful discussion nevertheless. Today we will have presentations on international smart city best practices and progress update on Sejong pilot city. And we will also hear from the Advisory Committee for Future Strategies members to talk about the progress at that committee and also to have a panel discussion. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today despite your very busy schedules, and my thanks also goes to the audience who have tuned in online. Now we're going to begin the session. First, I would like to introduce to you some important guests who have joined us today. We have with us the President of Smart City Association and Vice President of Smart City Division of Korea Land and Housing Corporation, Mr. Shin Kyung-chul. And from the Smart City Advisory Committee and Future Strategies, we have with us President Tae-ho Kim. Thank you very much. We also have other very important speakers and panelists who are with us, but in the interest of time, I am unable to introduce each one. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Shin Kyung-chul, Vice President of Smart City Division of Korea Land and Housing Corporation, to deliver an opening remark. Please welcome Mr. Shin with a warm round of applause.
Good afternoon. I am Shin Kyung-chul, the Vice President of Smart City Division from Korea Land and Housing Corporation. First of all, I want to thank Chairperson Kim Tae-ho from the Smart City Future Strategy Advisory Council and all the relevant parties. I thank you all for your support. And also, my thanks goes to Professor Sang-ho Lee, who is going to be the moderator for discussion session later, and Professor Young-sung Lee, Professor Jung-hoon Lee, and Director Jae-yong Lee, and also Council Member Young Tae-jo, and also Mr. Won-seok Jang from the LG-CNA Smart City Unit, the Principal Strategic Planner, for being here for their presentations and talks. And also, I want to thank Mr. Stephen Hilton from the UK and Dr. Chen Yu Lee from Taiwan for their upcoming presentations, and I want to thank all the other participants who are joining us online. Innovation is a key topic in our time. A smart city has been drawing a lot of attention as a space where innovation can take place at rapid space. Particularly, the fourth industrial revolution featuring big data and Internet of Things can be utilized to effectively resolve many urban issues. And this will help to improve the quality of life for many citizens and foster the growth of corporations that has creative ideas and technological know-how. So we will be able to create innovative ecosystem by building a smart city. My company is working at this frontier to explore uncharted territory, and we are leading many innovative efforts. Also, we are building the very first smart city in Korea in the city of Sejong, and we hope to build a successful case by building the right smart city suitable for the Korean circumstances. And also, we want to pursue cooperation and co-prosperity with the private sector in the areas such as mobility, healthcare, energy, environment. So we want to build a sustainable smart city, and we will not spare any capacity and the support we can provide to that end. To develop a smart city, and we've been hosting the World Smart City Expo for the past 5 years, and this is the 5th of its kind this year. And many experts from both home home and abroad are here today, and I hope that this will be a great forum to exchange ideas, to explore the infinite possibilities of a smart city, and a great forum for cooperation between the public and the private sector. And my company will also dedicate its efforts to improve the happiness of our citizens and to create more creative cities. Thank you all very much.
네, 이사장님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shin, for your warm remarks. We will be seeing a lot of contribution from the LH Corporation for establishing smart city in Korea. We're going to hear from international best practices and also progress in Korea, and I thank the LH Corporation for making this event possible. Now I would like to invite Mr. Kim Tae-ho, President of Advisory Committee for Future Strategy, to deliver some more remarks.
안녕하십니까.
Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tae-ho Kim, President of Advisory Committee for Future Strategy. Smart city has become an important global agenda. Countries are looking to develop the smart city industry to find solutions to the urban sustainability crises. Smart cities will raise the quality of life and well-being of citizens and serve as a new driver for economic development that can contribute to the happiness of global citizens. But of course, we cannot forget that there are obstacles to making the smart city a reality. The stakeholders, namely the public and private sectors and the citizenry, must all work together to make this new city system viable. We are each envisioning a city of strong connections between people, supported by technology, where each stakeholder serves his or her unique role on the basis of trust. Realizing this vision requires the spirit of coexistence and cooperation. The Smart City, the Advisory Committee for Future Strategies is composed of experts and aims to further the smart city vision and conduct the necessary research. I have full confidence that all who joined us today for the public-private partnership initiatives will contribute to the smart city development. Thank you very much for being here with us today. I hope today's discussion will contribute to enabling the smart city industry as a driving force for opening a new era, improving quality of life and promoting innovation and growth of nations around the world. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kim. I hope you can continue to contribute to the Smart City Initiative. Now we are going to begin the presentations on the topic of building smart city through PPP and cooperation. We will begin with some international speakers' presentations. The title of that is Smart City Experience and Opportunities in Bristol, Bath. We have with us Mr. Stephen Hilton, Director of Invest Bristol and Bath Smart City Sector Specialist.
Hi, I'm Steve Hilton. It's great to be talking with you here at this World Smart City Expo hosted by our good colleagues in South Korea. I'm going to be talking to you about Bristol and Bath and the west of England and our experience of being a leading smart city region. Now, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. I've been working in or around the idea of smart cities for at least 10 years, and if I'm honest, probably nearer 20. During that time, the language has altered. We might have once talked about connected cities or digital cities rather than smart cities. And certainly the technologies themselves have evolved. They've become faster and bigger and better. But many of the underlying principles and ambitions are the same. I ran a department at Bristol City Council called Futures for a number of years, where we created a leading smart cities programme and a city innovation team. I'm now a fellow at the University of Bristol Digital Futures Institute, where we're interested in sociotech. That's the intersection between society and innovative technologies. I run a business called City Global Futures, but the hat that I'm wearing as I speak with you now is as an advisor to Invest Bristol and Bath, which is the West of England region's inward investment service. So I'm going to tell you a little about Bristol and Bath's history and journey towards becoming a smart city region. I'll focus on energy, I'll focus on transport and mobility. I'll talk about the vital importance of a cutting-edge digital telecoms infrastructure. I'll also reflect on the creative industries and the role that they can play in helping to demystify the smart city and creating experiences which are compelling and accessible, enabling communities to feel part of the smart city future. I'll also finish then by just briefly reflecting upon the pandemic and what might be next for smart cities in Bristol, Bath, the West of England, and maybe even South Korea. So the West of England has a population of about 1.2 million people. The largest city is Bristol with a population of 500,000 people. It's generally quite an economically prosperous place, but that masks the fact that there are many parts of the community that aren't doing so well. There's pockets of disadvantage, and it's important that we see the smart city as an additional opportunity to level up, to make sure that all citizens and communities can have the opportunity to be part of the region's economic prosperity. There are 4 universities, and it's not surprising that TechNation identified the region as one of Europe's hotspots for investment in technologies such as IoT and blockchain. We were a top 20 location within Europe and a top 3 location within the UK. Innovation has been at the core of this success. We're fortunate to have a world-class business incubator called Set Squared, with a presence in both Bristol and in Bath. It's regularly voted as the best university business incubator in the world. We have companies locally who are embedding intelligence into silicon chips, who are embedding intelligence into the future energy system, and they're attracting billions of investment for their work. And of course, Bristol was recognised as a global smart city pioneer at the Mobile World Congress GLOMO Awards in Barcelona. Now, I always feel that the creative industries are a key driver of much of this success. Aardman Animation is the largest digital animation studio in the UK, and it started out in a small cabin on the harbour in Bristol. Much of the world's natural history content is produced locally. Our Wild Screen Film Festival was forced to go virtual during the pandemic, but it still attracted a large international audience. Now, these businesses are important. They keep us entertained. But more than that, they also produce hundreds of petabytes of content that needs to be stored, it needs to be rendered, it needs to be shared, all before it can be streamed for you and I to enjoy within our own homes. And so it's a real driver of the need for digital innovation. So over these decades, what we've been doing is creating this innovation ecosystem. We've brought together the creative companies with the companies who are interested in the pipes and the wires. We've brought together the universities with the community. We've brought together the local authorities with the regional authorities, and together we've created an ecosystem that works, and people want to be part of it. So they move to Bristol, Bath, the West of England, because they know they can work with other companies that are like-minded, they can recruit people, and they just want to be close to and part of that innovation ecosystem. So I've talked about the importance of telecoms and digital infrastructure. We have a world-leading presence in Bristol in the University of Bristol Smart Internet Lab. They've been pioneering in 5G and are now involved in the research that will ultimately set the standards for what will become 6G. They're pioneering things like Open RAN, which is creating a new way for smaller companies to play an active role in the cutting edge telecoms infrastructure. And we're seeing many companies start to develop a bigger presence within the region. We have Zeta Networks, Blue Wireless, Mabellium, Parallel Networks, and of course BT. All of these companies recognize that they want to be here because we understand the value of cutting-edge mobile connectivity. And that understanding has also helped us to create a number of regional test beds. Bristol is Open was a partnership with Nokia and NEC. The Umbrella Internet of Things test bed in South Gloucestershire is a partnership with Toshiba Research Labs Europe. And our work on smart tourism created a cutting-edge 5G network, delivering mobile, augmented and virtual reality experiences with less than 1 millisecond of latency in a 2,000-year-old Roman World Heritage site. It's not surprising that those companies want to be here because they really get excited about the fact that we're using the connectivity that they can provide to deliver really spectacular experiences for end users. But let's think about energy. This has been an important part of the mix. We have innovated in all parts of the energy system. We've experimented with batteries, we've experimented with tariffs, we've experimented with smart meters. We've had a hydrogen-powered ferry, a methane-powered bus fleet. In many ways, Bristol has been miles ahead of where the energy sector is now headed. And we have new projects. Twinergy is looking at creating a digital twin for the energy system within Bristol. And the council, through its City Leap programme, is seeking to procure a long-term strategic commercial energy company partner. And together, they will invest £1 billion in a portfolio of energy opportunities that will help steer the council and the city towards its net zero ambitions. It's also, of course, bigger than just energy. We have expertise in the city in finance and professional services, companies who've been making green deals for decades. The Composites Centre is a national facility that's at the cutting edge of building new materials, for example, for use in wind turbines. And the Southwest Nuclear Hub is based within the University of Bristol. And transport and mobility have been a strong theme within our smart cities work. Increasingly, there's understanding that the future of transport and mobility is about choice. It's about micro-mobility. It's about transport on demand. We have an e-scooter trial within the region as part of work on a future mobility zone. We're looking at interchanges between different forms of transport within neighbourhoods. And the sense is that we're seeing a shift away from reliance on cars towards more sustainable forms of transport, including walking, cycling and electric vehicles. When I was at the City Council, we built a state-of-the-art city control room, a smart city control room, in order to optimise the traffic flow. But now it also plays a vitally important role in thinking about the interchange between those different modes of transport, in thinking about how to encourage more sustainable journeys, and also about monitoring air pollution as an increasingly important issue that is of concern to citizens everywhere. Our 5G logistics project brings together all of these skills in one programme. A 5G network is exploring how to link public and private networks. IoT is embedding sensors in goods in transit in order to monitor their condition during the journey. And that sort of sense of innovation by bringing all of the parts of the system together is really at the heart of what we're trying to do. Creativity and culture is central, not just because it creates a nice place to live, but because in creating a nice place to live, it means that graduates from the university choose to stay here. People want to be in the city because it has a vibrant, lively, youthful culture. And of course, as I said, by investing in that creativity, we also have a different lens through which we can look at the smart city. Our Playable Cities programme turned the idea of the smart city on its head. It was about fun, it was about experiences, it was about connecting people to the city in delightful and unexpected ways. And in a community setting, Knoll West Media Centre is an arts organisation that also has a cutting-edge understanding of digital technologies and inclusion. For many years, they've worked with the local community as well as nationally and internationally to really reshape our thinking about what we mean when we talk about digital inclusion. They represent the city in the European network of living labs, actively putting into practice the idea that real innovation happens when you bring together different parts of the system to co-design solutions that work for everybody. So to finish, what does the future hold? I think none of us would be able to predict entirely what will happen next, but we all recognise that digital has become increasingly important to everything that we do, whether it's work, learning, retail, transport. It's there to stay now. And many of the barriers and silos that have kept the smart city perhaps at a smaller scale than it could have been in the past, I think many of those barriers have now been overcome. But at the same time, we are living in the climate emergency, and we can't be a smart city without being a sustainable city. And equally, we can't be a smart city without being an inclusive city. And it's the combination of those three things, innovation, inclusion, and sustainability, that really will bring the next generation of the smart city into sharp focus. If you'd like to attend an event in the West of England virtually, there are details here. Bristol and Bath are playing an active role in the upcoming COP in COP in Glasgow in the autumn. And please do tune into this event online in order to be part of the discussion about this next phase of development. And finally, if you want to find out even more, please get in contact with Invest Bristol and Bath. The details are here. And on the slide, there's also a link to a new video that summarises and showcases much of the region's innovation. So thank you. It's been great to speak with you. I hope the rest of the event goes well. And I hope someday in the not too distant future to be able to return to South Korea. Thank you.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So it was, I really look forward to seeing him once again here in Korea. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation.
빌딩
Our next presentation is titled Taipei Smart City Development Case Example, and presenter is Mr. Chan Yu Lee, Director of Smart Taipei Project Management Office. He will be presenting through video.
This is Chen Yu Lee, Director of Taipei Smart City Office. I'm very honored to give a brief presentation about building smart city through the private-public partnership and cooperation. So before I started, I'd like to make a very brief introduction to the Smart Taipei project. So in my following talk, will include some of the mechanisms we already implement in Taipei, and also I will show you some of the case after a PPP model that we implement in smart city projects. So as you can see, the vision of the Smart Taipei project, we're not only trying to make the city more livable and sustainable, and also we involve lots of different stakeholders that include, we also help to promote the ICT industry in Taiwan. So for to engage the private sector to be part of the smart city, it's very important issue in our vision. And also, as we both, I think all of us will both agree with that. Lots of small cities, it's more like province-driven smart cities. That means we not only need to make a master plan of the smart city, we also need to deal with the real problem. So, and the reason I mentioned about the real problem, because it also relates to the partnership between public and private. So for the Smart Taipei project, actually, we started this project about 6 years ago. But in the first 2 years, we tried to figure out what is exactly the major concept of Smart Taipei. So we tried to, dig out all the problems, and we figure out that the major problem, one of the major problem of the city government itself is we don't have the innovation abilities. We lack of the innovation abilities. That means in the past, the only thing we can do is we need to purchase very mature system, very mature solution to make sure we've done everything in our plan. But it's not innovative, it always, that's why people always say the government, is so conservation. So I think that the one of the major issue in smart city is how can we, deal with the innovation ability by support of the private sector. So in the past, we do lots of mechanisms trying to engage those private stakeholders to join our system. So that's very important. So from 2016, we start our phase 1. So we established a mechanism called bottom-up mechanism. It's more like a broader PPP models. So in that phase, actually, we've opened a new mechanism that we make every private sector can be very easy to work with public sector, and also they can almost do all kind of the possible solution in Taipei. And for the second phase, we enforce this mechanism by divide to 2 different plot concept projects. The original one bottom up, and also we have the advanced one called the top down plot concept projects. So for the both plot concept project is both are the public and private partnership model, but a little bit different. So for the top down model, actually we more focusing on dig out the real need of the public sectors. So for those plot concept project, we make the private sector, can be very easy to work with the public sector, no matter the needs come from. So that's how exactly we do the pro concept project, and also to deal with the partnership between public and private. So in short, that means in the past we have in Taipei, Smart Taipei project, we have lots of function, but we're more focusing on how to engage the private sector with, to work with Taipei, with the city government. And I will jump to the 3 stage. So actually we have lots of different type of the pro concept. I mean the private-public partnership model, PPP models. So in the first phase, we call it the proof of concept project, as I mentioned. In this phase, as I just mentioned, we try to involve more private sector to work with us, and also try to able to test all kind of the solutions. So in this phase, actually, it doesn't concern about any financial support. So it's more like a real partnership between public and private. So for the both sides, they will contribute their own resources and work together to share their result. So for the government side, it can very easy to understand what's the maturity, what's the possibility of the new solutions. And even if fail, we can learn a lot from this project. And for the private sector side, actually they can test the solution in real field, and also they can have a connection with a related public sector. So that's the key for the phase 1. And if everything goes well, then we'll go to the phase 2 and phase 3. That means the pilot or probably the scale up. But for the pilot project, we also have lots of different ways to work with private sector. That's another PPP model. I will give some of the example later. That include, probably we can have a tender to purchase those services, and also we probably have a partnership that we spend part of the money, but most of the probably more than half of money come from the industry or probably their business model. And even we have some of the case they can provide a sustainable service, rely on their own business model. So for the government side, we only need to manage them and give them some of the discount, some of the little bit benefit, and also help them to deal with probably legal problem and other policy issues. So that's what exactly we do in deal with the PPP model. And as you can see, that's the result. We do lots of projects. That's why we call it innovation, because you always need to face the failure problems, and it works very well. So that's why we receive lots of award recognition, and expert call as a game changer. So I will give you, for the following 5-6 minutes, I will give you some of example of different type of the PPP model. The first one is, as I say, we call it a bottom-up pro concept project. So, for example, lots of companies that propose the idea of an autonomous vehicle to the city government, so vote them. This project is, it's a pure partnership, so it don't concern any budget. We don't spend any money on it. So that means they need to find their own resources, but we will provide the test field, so we help them to find the bus only lane. They then have the right to run the test in those roads, and we also need to evaluate the possibility of the autonomous vehicle. And for the private company and private sector, they also need to understand what is their what's the limit of their ability and what service they can provide in the real field. So that's very important. And also, that's another case. For example, we need to deal with the bridge problem with a better solution. So we work with that's a foreign company, and that's a French company. So they got funding from the Horizon 2020, and they work with us in Taiwan. We find a local partner in Taiwan, so they work together to help us to build up this solution to test the usability of these solutions. The results not good enough to become a tender, but actually this is a very successful model. So for not only for the private and also for the public, so we can really understand what exactly the sensor can bring us to, as for example, to check the real situation of the bridge by those sensors. And this is another case that's very successful. A private company, they're developing a very new way to manage the lighting system in a parking place, and we do the test, and the results very nice. People won't aware that the lighting was turned off, so they can feel more safer for the citizens, and it works very well after test. Then we make it become a tender. So lots of, especially for the huge parking lots, huge parking space area, they adopt this kind of solution to save the energy and also provide a better service to the citizens. And those. The overall case was proposed. The idea was proposed by the private sector, but as I say, about 2 years ago, we also take some need from the Department of Taipei City Government. For example, especially to deal with the COVID, when we face the COVID situation, we need lots of solutions to support us. So one is the hospital. The hospital need some of the new solution can be able to deliver food and resources to the patient when, especially, they probably have the COVID issues. So last year we tested, and this year we're using the robot to test the resource deliver robot via the 5G network in the hospital area. Yeah, so that make us can understand if the solution can fulfill the need of the hospital. And also, there's another case that also make us very proud because, last year actually, when the pandemic happened, during that time we need lots of masks for the citizen to protect themselves. So the resource is very real. So we need to have a better way to deliver those masks to our citizens. So we need to have a real name system with a vending machine, because currently it's very difficult, because in the past we need to rely on the human force to deliver those masks, but now we can have the vending machine. But most important is this solution was established in 1 month. So because we already have very mature PPP model, so we can very quick to work with a private company to come out this kind of the solution and to deal with the problem. And also and for the following 3 cases, I will mention more about how to scale up and what model we can adapt. So there's a lot of way to adapt solution and also to make it scale up. The easy way is to spend money to purchase those services to our citizens, but you can find but our resources is very limited. So you always need to figure out more possible models. So we have a couple of cases that's using a different model to establish those very nice smart city service to our citizens. So, for example, the iTrash solution is intelligent trash can, but unlike other, probably some of people you already know that in Taiwan we have a very mature waste management system. So we have a trash trunk that will have a fixed route and to collect your waste. but it's not, but after a couple years, after 20 years, actually there's a lot of different lifestyle in Taipei already. So people need to have another way to, down their west. So that's why we try to work with a different private sector to provide better waste management system to our citizens. So for this case, for the first stage, we test the usability and possibility, and for after iTrash with one stop, and after that we start to test in one district with five machines, and in the future, actually, we will have a partnership with them. So we need them to figure out their own business model, and that makes they can do a lot of business, around their stations. So that's what exactly we do for the waste management by the PPP model. And this is another case that very interesting, because in the past, actually, they don't have this kind of the business. Couple company, they try to provide the kiosk public services, more like information stations to provide data, provide lots of information to the citizens. So we have, in the past, it's very difficult to understand who will in charge of these kind of services. So after 2 years test, we figure out a new management policy so that we make the people, the private sector can be able to install and all kind of the kiosk, the information station under the control of the city government, and they can have their own business model, to make money and make the station can be sustainable. And we can also deliver some of the public service through these information stations. So that's another way of how we work with the private sector. And my final case, I'm sorry, that's due to time limit. So this is my last case. Actually, for the traffic, we also do lots of different PPP model to provide a service to our citizens. For example, in Taiwan, in Taipei, we have very mature metro system and bus network, but we also trying to promote the sharing economic in Taipei, because we believe that they can reduce the loading of the private vehicles. That also benefit to our whole public transportation systems. But there's still not the level 1 of the smart transportation. Level 1 of the smart transportation will be the metro, bus, and of course the biking. Biking now is one part of the public transportations. But we very willing to helping private sector to provide all kinds of services. So that's why we do lots of tests with them, and we help them to deal with the legal problem. And we also ask them to figure out their own business model. So now in Taipei, we already have 3 operators provide about more than 13,000 scooters to our citizens. So it means it will replace lots of private scooters. So we have a more room, more space, and better air quality for our citizens. And of course, now we have one sharing an electronic car company provide more than 1.3 thousand of the cars. And also, of course, the final one is the parking. Already provide almost 30,000 of the parking space shared to everyone. So that's another way we work with the private sector to improve our transportations. So I think the goal of the Smart Taipei project is not only to make a very concrete, complete master plan to design the city by ourselves. We also want to involve private sector and other organizations to help us to make the city better. So that's why we have a two line. We have a top-down line, we have a bottom line, and we wish we can, mix and those two lines together to make Taipei City a better city. Okay, so that's my presentation. Thank you for the listening. If you have a further question and problem, feel free to contact me. This is Chen Yu Li. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Director Chen Yu Li, for your wonderful presentation. We have heard the international case presentation, and we are now going to hear a presentation from Korea. The presenter is Mr. Won-seok Chang, who is the Smart SOC Principal Strategic Planner at LG CNS. Please welcome Mr. Chang with a warm round of applause.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I am Chang Won-seok, and I'm from LG CNS. Nice to meet you all. I would like to thank the Korea Land and Housing Corporation and also the Advisory Committee for Future Strategies for organizing this event. And we have quite a gathering here on offline, and I would like to thank you for being here. And I would also like to thank the audience who are listening in online. Now, I'm going to talk about the Sejong Smart City project and the plan and how it's progressing. And I'm going to talk about what the project is all about. There are three key aspects to this that I'm going to cover. And I'm also going to talk about the PPP elements that are central to this project. First of all, this is an overview of the Smart National Pilot City project. There is a living zone 5-1. This is the location of the planned smart city of Sejong. But before I talk about the project itself, let me talk about why this project was first incepted. The Korean government has launched the National Pilot City project because they want to move away from the U-City project, which is primarily led by the government and the public sector. And they also want to create more service-oriented smart cities. So whereas the past pilot cities have been designed and planned under the initiative of the government primarily, but now the current government wants to use the Smart City initiative as a way of fostering industries and economic development, as well as providing a better environment for the citizens. So again, this is to be located in the living zone 5-1 in the Sejong city, and the project area is 2.74 million square meters, and the project duration is minimum 15 years, and the key services that will be deployed here at the Smart City include the mobility service. So the Sejong citizens will be able to enjoy very innovative services once this Smart City is completed. Now, I would like to talk about the actual substance of the project that will unfold. There are three elements. First is the pioneer zone, and second is the innovative services, and third is sustainable private-public partnership. So one of the aims of this project is to create a car-free environment and introduce very innovative services and intelligent services. And they want to run this smart city as an intelligent platform city. And I'm going to go into a bit of a detail about each of these three elements. First, the Pioneer Zone. As I mentioned before, the Sejong National Pilot City is located here in Zone 5-1. And this is the area marked in gray. And at the center of this, where it's colored in yellow and blue, these are the pioneer zones within the Zone 5-1. And the pioneer zone will be developed by a jointly created project entity that will purchase the site and design and develop what is to go into this pioneer zone. And in the past, the U-City initiatives often led to the development in services, and that was the end of it. But by having this pioneer zone within the smart city, the government wants to actually integrate the smart city in a more sustainable way into this central area, and also do this based on private-public partnership. First of all, they want to develop this as a mixed-use area. In the past, oftentimes the cities were very segregated in terms of the residential zone and the commercial and business zones. But the aim here is to have a more mixed-use type of planning so that the people can feel very comfortable living within the city, working and enjoying leisure at the same time. And also, there are plans to create transportation systems that are very intelligent, and also there are plans to develop a pedestrian-oriented street and road system so that on the one hand you have the pedestrian focus, but at the same time there are more intelligent mobility solutions that go hand in hand with this environment. And futuristic smart services will be integrated into the pioneer zone so that people's lifestyle will actually change as a result of these new services. Next, smart, innovative services is another key element of this project. The corporations will be set up to develop these services. And as of now, we had proposed 21 services for this project entity to develop. And these are, of course, proposed by the private sector. But in addition to this, the public sector also has ideas for developing 18 services. So we have 21 services that will be developed by the project entity, jointly incorporated by private-public partnership. And then on the other hand, there will be 18 services that will be led by the public sector. And I'm going to go into detail about these, but we are not going to end the development of services with these 21 services. We will have an ongoing endeavor to identify needs for new services, and this will be an ongoing effort. And this plan itself is not going to be just fixed as is. And another key element is one of the key elements of the smart services are the mobility service. Sejong City, because it's a relatively new city, and there is a significant demand for mobility services. So in addition to addressing the existing demand for more mobility, there's also the need to introduce new modes of transportation, such as autonomous driving vehicles. So this will be a very interesting area. There is also the idea of introducing mobility as a service so that people who don't own a car can easily move from one place to the next within the city. In addition to this, personal mobility service and also mobility on demand, smart charging services are some of the other mobility-related services that are in the works for the Sejong pilot city. And these mobility services will not be limited to the Zone 5-1 that I mentioned. This will also expand into the rest of the Sejong city and also even beyond the Sejong city border to connect to other provinces nearby. And so this is going to be a growing and evolving initiative. And if a new alternative means of transportation are developed, perhaps this area can be used as test bed for new mobility modes. Second is the life innovation services. It is very important for citizens to be able to enjoy their life in the city, and we need to develop new visions for a smart city so that they can significantly change their lifestyle and enjoy better quality of life. So we have worked to identify the needs that citizens face in their day-to-day life and found that health management is one key area of significant demand. This smart city is is being planned as a car-free city. So in addition to the healthcare zone, there is going to be a significant need for smart integrated delivery services. And so we have ideas for enabling these. And also within the city, it is very important to nurture a community and foster relationship building between citizens. Although today we talk about how everything is being conducted remotely and there needs to be a lot of distancing between people, but I think at the end of the day, we do need to nurture a sense of community in the city, and Smart Farm is one of the ways in which we could foster that sense of community and to have people engage with each other. In Smart City, of course, there are innovative services that are technology-based, but in addition to that, we also need to introduce services that can help people really feel the innovation and really enjoy the life in the city. And these services will be implemented on the Smart City platform. In order for these smart cities to be run very smoothly, a lot of data is required, and the data management is very critical in this regard. So we are thinking of introducing AI, data hub, IoT, digital twins, cybersecurity, and blockchain technology, and we want to integrate all these different technologies into an open smart city platform. From the citizens' perspective, they will not really be seeing the back end of these technologies. But they will still need to be able to utilize the services very conveniently. So we are going to launch the Sejong Citizen app so that the citizens themselves can easily access these very convenient and innovative smart city services.
And third and last point, we want to build a sustainable smart city. To foster that, what kind of a public and private partnership can take place? So as I mentioned earlier, the smart city pilot project in Sejong is not just about the public sector or the private sector building the smart city and then washing our hands off. No, that is not about that. Once we build a smart city, we want to continuously monitor the city and maintain the city and keep the services at an excellent level. There were a lot of urban development projects in the form of SPC. So the private sector funding and also public administration and the public support. So we've done that in the past. So going forward, if we want to take a similar example in the smart city project, it's going to be it's not going to be just a paper special purpose vehicle. It's going to be a real entity to build a smart city and to maintain the smart city. So we are going to establish such a legal entity in cooperation with the Sejong City government. And this kind of a legal entity or business enterprise is going to be established as a going concern. So it's going to stay alive even after the completion of the building of smart city. And this business entity or legal entity is going to provide. It's not going to be limited to the current 20 or so projects that we are planning. No, it's going to be beyond that because technology is going to keep evolving. So once we build this legal entity or the project enterprise, the enterprise is going to stay to deal with all the fast changes that need to occur in order to keep the smart city smart into the future. So in that process, we hope to see more participation from the private sector as well. So we want to provide more cooperation opportunities to the private sector as well. And we welcome private sector participation, of course. And also, so for the past about 15 years, we need to build a smart city and also we need to operate the smart city. So how to optimize that project? So that's what we are thinking about. So what we kind of look forward is we want to be flexible in responding to any arising needs. So we want to build the right platform to do that. So we proposed 21 services, as I mentioned earlier, but depending on the future evolution of the technology or depending on the new needs coming from the citizens living in this area, we are going to provide more services. And smart city, what really sets apart the smart city from the existing cities is that smart city needs to be the center for fourth industrial revolution. And the key component in the fourth industrial revolution is a big data, how to collect and manage and utilize the big data. So that's going to be a key component of building a smart city. So to do that, we are already a lot of local authorities are collecting a lot of data, but we cannot stop there. We cannot just build a new service based on collected data. We need to analyze the data properly, and we need to extract the right application from the data analytics. So that's our more or less a near-term goal. And to do that, we are building the right platform. And on top of that platform, we hope to maintain not just a smart city, but also we want to invite our consortium, private sector partners within the consortium. So, for example, we are looking into whether we can connect private sector data onto this platform as well. So if we can combine such data collected by local authorities and the data that we receive from the private sector partners, then based on this huge data, that we will be able to identify and provide new services as well. So we want to utilize this kind of big data to improve upon the existing services, and we want to be able to really custom tailor these services to every single citizen. So through these kind of custom tailored services and providing such custom tailored services will also open new opportunities to utilize data. So we want to build a data ecosystem essentially in partnership with our private sector partners. And also for effective public and private partnership, we want to have this kind of cooperation from the civil society as well. So we really need to put the citizens at the center of all these efforts. So from the start of our project, we thought about citizens. And of course, I know that a lot of local authorities run a lot of citizen-oriented programs, but this is really going to be oriented towards the citizens. That's why we built the Living Lab. And smart cities, once they're established, they need to be sustainable on their own. They need to be able to create jobs on their own. And we hope to foster smart city itself as an industry. And to that end, we also provide a lot of business-friendly incubation services or test bed services as well. So, for example, programs to foster startups in the Sejong area, or working with local universities in the area, or working with the local businesses in the Sejong시 area, so that we can foster more startups and more entrepreneurship in this area. And we also have a regulatory sandbox approach here. So we want to improve upon the existing regulations so as to foster startups and entrepreneurship. So we really want to see the private sector players to take the lead and to be more proactive. We want the citizens to be more proactive in participating in building a smart city and keeping the smart city sustainable. So this has been what I've prepared for my presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, so the pilot project for building smart city in Sejong City is still at the early stage, and we are building the overall architecture of planning, developing, and the project is soon going to start in full-fledged. So we are working very hard to get things going, and we really hope to build the right type of smart city where businesses can be fostered and the citizens can participate. Thank you very much.
네, 전문위원님 발표 감사.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. He has shared with us the progress on the Sejong Pilot Smart City project. So we have heard from both Korea and elsewhere, and this reminds us that smart city is no longer something that will happen in the distant future. Now we are going to have a panel discussion about the private-public partnership for Sejong National Pilot Smart City Initiative. We have with us Mr. Dr. Sang-ho Lee, professor of Hanbad University, who will serve as the moderator for this panel discussion. So here are the panelists. We will once again welcome Mr. Won-seok Chang from LGCNS to be on stage for the panel discussion. And we will have with us Professor Young-sung Lee of Seoul National University and And we have with us Mr. Jae-Young Lee, Director of Smart City Research Center, and also Mr. Young-tae Chu, who is from the LH Research Institute. So we have invited all the panelists onto the stage. We actually sent a question in advance to Mr. Chen-Yu Lee, and we asked about the success and failure factors for Smart City.
I think the question is how we define success of projects and what is the condition for success. Okay. Basically, as I just mentioned in my talk, we have lots of 3 different types of project. We start from poor concept project, and the second phase will become the pilot project. That's like a small scale with tender, and of course the scale up projects. So it's quite different, between poor concept project and those tender, because the pilot project and scale up project, they will become the tenders. So for the tender, they will have very specific KPI to achieve. So that's more easy because everyone used to run the tenders. But for the POC project, basically it's a little bit different from those tenders, and so we need to define what is what exactly we need from those POC projects. So basically for the POC project, the purpose of the POC project is to figure out the possibility of the solutions. So that means, in simple, if we can conclude that this poor concept project is executable with a specific outcome that is meet the requirement of the department, then we can call it as a success. And so that also means, so that means the condition of the project will change, depend on the situation and depend on the stakeholders. For example, we're looking for one specific solution, but probably they will come. They probably will 2 or more vendors they're willing to do the poor concept project, so they probably will use the different way to resolve the problem. So that's why we will have we call it the opportunity assessment OA process to deal with every project, by a group of expert and stakeholder to as I say, to define the success of the projects by looking for the possibility of the the outcome, and also if the project is executable. And so if everyone agree with that, then we will make it become a real tender. So that's how we call it a success one. But of course, some of the projects, they won't get into the tender, but also we will call it success because we think the project is also executable and benefit to the government, to the citizens. But maybe the time's not come yet. I mean, the priority is not good enough. So that means it will not become a tender. But we also can define that's a success case for the poor concept project. So that's my answer. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 발표에 이어서 답변까지 주셨습니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much for the response to the question. Now I would like to turn the microphone over to Dr. Sang-ho Lee.
Good afternoon. I am Sang-ho Lee, and I'm going to be the moderator for this panel discussion. Welcome you all to the World Smart City Expo. So this session is managed by LH. So here we are to talk about building a smart city through the public and private partnership. So we before we pursued the smart city, there was also U-City. So under the catchphrase of U-City, we already had experience of a public and private partnership. But with the emergence of the smart city, that cooperation is much more prominent. So many really large, prominent private sector companies, including Google and Apple, all these are working with the public sector to build a smart city around the world. So in that sense, I believe this session and this panel discussion is very important and timely to move forward the task of building a smart city in front of us. We listened to 3 wonderful presentations. And to prepare for today's, in this panel discussion, we have 5 people here. So if you can spend 5 minutes each, starting with Professor Lee Young-sung and Professor Lee Jung-yuk and Mr. Jung Han-seok and Yong Tae-cho. To realize a smart city, we need, do we really need a public-private city at this stage? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to today's panel discussion. So, do we need a cooperation between public and private sector? I believe that such partnership is actually one of the success factors for a smart city. So, this year, we had an index report, Smart City Index report that we worked with Cambridge University. So in that index, what indicator is actually innovative, how innovative a city is. So over 53% of cities mentioned that they're focused on building innovation, incubation environment. And also ICT infrastructure setup is very important. What does it mean? It means that in the past, we were more focused on infrastructure, for example. So how are we going to build industry? Or how are we going to top up the existing industry? And how are we going to improve essentially the competitiveness of a city? That was the focus in the past. But now, in the context of the smart city, or in the context of fostering innovation in an urban environment, we now have a slightly different focus. So there is a science park in Cambridge, for example, and it didn't receive investment from the government actually. It was funded privately, but their revenue, annual revenue, is really huge, and it's already been around for about 20 years. And I hope that kind of example can be replicated in Sejong City. So not just running the city, but how are we going to build a really innovative city? And how are we going to maintain such innovation as city? And to that end, how can the administrative services support that? So I think that should be the way we think about smart city. We already heard from the speaker from Taipei and the experience of Taipei, and the city of Taipei is really aggressively pursuing building a smart city, and innovation is a key value in their effort. And really, in reality, Taipei is really ranking high, rising fast in terms of city's innovation. So there are a lot of projects going on in Taipei, and I believe that we also need to foster that kind of values when we pursue smart city. In that way, inviting private sector participation is going to be very important, not just Korean corporations, but global corporations as well. And when what kind of a legal entity will be suitable for public and private partnership, and what should be the governance structure for such legal entity, and what kind of innovation does that legal entity really pursue? So, IT departments. So these kinds of efforts for innovation is used to be led by ICT departments, but now innovation is much more important concept, and ICT will be one component of innovation. So now, if you look at some government agency, there is an innovation department, and they're leading the efforts to build a smart city. So I think this is the current task in front of us.
Thank you very much for that insight. As the smart city initiatives expand, they often become a major national agenda. And in order for this to become one of the key economic drivers, it is important for this to become something that involves more private partnership. But of course, there are different cases. In Korea, for example, there was a lot of public sector drive in launching these kind of initiatives. And also in the United States, I heard that there was a plan that was announced to make a huge smart city. So there is this major trend in pursuing smart city, and therefore it is very important to learn from the success cases as well as the cases where there was a failure. So in order for the smart city to provide more opportunities for economic development, and if for the smart city to become really beneficial for the people, what kind of lessons can we draw from the success and failure cases? In Toronto, the case of development by Google had some very good ideas, but the project did not continue. And the largest issue there was the issue of privacy infringement, and the citizens resisted to such potential privacy infringement. And Google is a giant company. And when Google got involved in the real estate development aspect of this as well, there was huge backlash from the citizens. Now, companies actually want most the data, but from the individual's perspective, there is always this risk of privacy infringement. And so how to solve this issue is at the crux of the success of Smart City. And it is very important to have clear reasons why people need to share their data and what kind of benefits that individuals can get from sharing their data. These must be very clearly identified in order for Smart City to succeed. And so there needs to be a very clear roadmap as to what the Smart City can offer down the road. And without that clear vision available, it is very difficult to persuade the general public to agree to sharing their data. And I believe in Korea also we face similar challenges and issues. In order for this to be developed as a new ecosystem, we really need to understand that there is a need for this proof of concept, which was explained in detail by the Taiwanese speaker. And I think this is very important to understand the technology and its feasibility before going into full-scale project. Recently, I had a chance to look at the full version of the AI by Tesla. And I realize there may be a lot of technologies that are under development currently that will not really survive in the market. And that will also entail a huge lost spending. And so we need to have a very stringent proof of concept approach to the technologies that are being suggested to become a part of the smart city. And we need to have a clear roadmap presented to the people in order to get their buy-in and to get meaningful public and private partnership. And also, finally, who will have the responsibility for managing this data? Even if the people were to agree to share their private data, it's such a huge big data, and in order for this data to lead to an economy of scale, there will be a need to have a national alliance of data cloud system, and the leading IT companies should get involved and utilize this platform together. I think this is something that needs to happen in order for the economy of scale of using data to be realized. As we heard from the British case and also the Taiwanese case, it is very important to have advanced and sophisticated technology available in order for the Smart City initiative to succeed. But even when there is advanced technology available, if the citizens refuse to embrace it, it can still lead to a failure. So while technological innovation is necessary, it is at the same time very important to get acceptance from the public. And I think this is a very important aspect of the public-private partnership that we're talking about. As we heard the three presentations, I felt that we had a chance to look at a very innovative initiatives. And innovative initiatives also come with risks of failure. And yet, there are people taking the risks and taking very ambitious efforts. And one of that is, of course, is the National Pilot City Initiative. So, Mr. Chang, in order for this very bold initiative to succeed, even if there are certain elements of it that fails, this will contribute significantly to development of Korean economy and the smart city in general. So what kind of public-private partnership is necessary, and what agenda should we focus on?
네, LGCNS 장.
Hello, I'm from LGCNS. We are in the planning stage for the Smart City project in the Sejong City area. Yes, it is an ambitious goal. As the two professors pointed out, the public-private partnership is important, of course, but there are some issues to be resolved. But one of the important elements for Smart City is, of course, data. And I believe that in terms of the technical element for a successful project, how can we collect, analyze, and effectively utilize data? I think that is going to be a key issue, of a key technical issue. So we are working on that, and as some of you expressed your concern, how to protect the privacy of this data. Of course, that's an important issue as well. So on the technology side, we are working hard. And in terms of the participation, so coming from a corporate sector, as I mentioned towards the end of my presentation, how to effectively manage the data, or what kind of services can be provided based on the data. So I I believe that private sector companies might need more open opportunities. For example, I talked about a regulatory sandbox. So this kind of pilot project from the government receives more favorable treatment in terms of dealing with regulations. But a regulatory sandbox, for example, you need to obtain the permission from the government so that you can benefit from the regulatory sandbox program. So, for example, for this kind of special smart city pilot project, you are allowed to do certain things, even if in the framework of the regulatory sandbox. So, if that kind of program can be more fostered and more available, then it will ultimately foster more innovation and more creative ideas from the private sector. And as your question mentioned, ultimately, for us to move towards the ultimate goal of a smart city, we would love to see more open regulations, meaning if the regulation can be relaxed for more innovative ideas, that will help to foster the private and public partnership. Yes, from the perspective of the government, regulatory sandbox is a really dramatic offering from the government. But yes, coming from the private sector perspective, certain things might still left to be desired. We are actually were given time till 4 p.m., but all the panelists observed the time limit so well, so we have more time left. So now, Dr. Zhou, so we heard about the Taipei case, public-private partnership, but the partnership between the private and public sectors, and also for the success and growth of a smart city, as Professor Young-Sung Lee mentioned, social inclusion or social innovation needs to be ensured. So in that sense, I think participation from the citizens is very important. And also, as Mr. Chang mentioned as well, we need to see more civil participation as well. So, Dr. Zhou, in your view, what should be the role of people? Well, it could be monitoring role, so people could monitor what the public sector or the private sectors are doing to build a smart city, or what kind of agenda they need to be focused on.
Thank you very much for that question. There is a lot of discussion about citizen engagement and smart city initiatives, because ultimately the citizens will be the ones benefiting from the smart city that is created. So therefore, it is only natural that citizens should be engaged in the process of smart city development. And there can be many different ways in which the citizens can participate. However, the way the citizens participate is evolving, because today we actually have cases where the citizens are actually leading and not just participating in the project. Living Lab is one such example. And we will be able to have different modes of citizen participation. One aspect could be engagement in the data issues. As in the Toronto case, the citizens will not share voluntarily data that they don't want to share. So there needs to be a system that will encourage citizens to voluntarily share information. And there's what's called a citizen kit. And there are sensors that are distributed to the citizens, and citizens will be able to share information and data about the environment that they live in, and this is done quite voluntarily. So a system that encourages citizens to voluntarily share data is very critical. And of course, sharing the data could be done for free, but also we could think of providing rewards for data that is shared by the citizens. Many people talk about crowdsourcing. We could actually have crowdsourcing for data. And I think data will be a key issue on which citizens can actively participate with regards to the smart city initiatives. And secondly, the Living Lab is, I already mentioned this, but citizens want to understand what kind of benefits and services they can enjoy from the smart city. And we have not had an example of a meaningful living lab that was implemented in city development initiatives. In the West, there are actually living labs that have been established. So the citizens get involved in identifying the kind of services they want to have in the future city, and they get involved in the ideation process, and so I hope that we can have a similar approach implemented in the Sejong National Pilot City. And there are also new city development in other areas in Korea that are being talked about. So even if these city development projects are not smart city projects, I think we could still think about introducing the Living Lab approach. And there is what's called a smart city, a smart first town in Busan. And so in this area can be used as test bed. And so perhaps we could have something similar for the Sejong pilot smart city so that people can utilize the smart first lab as a place where they can test the potential services that will become available. I think that was a very interesting suggestion. When we think about smart city, we often think about what services will be available there, and the discussion ends there pretty much. And when the government implements such projects, there are proposals submitted, and the proposals are implemented, and then after that we see very little follow-up. But if we can have the kind of living lab approach, it would be very interesting because the citizens can get involved in the development process, giving the public and private partners feedback on what services are more attractive and what can be tweaked a little bit. So I think in that sense, the participation of citizens is very important, and citizens can actually provide very valuable feedback. So the current administration, I think, has maybe less than a year of term left. When we were still promoting the U-City project, people were asking me, do you think the U-City project will continue because the administration is going to change? And recently, I'm getting a lot of questions about whether the Smart City initiative will continue because the current administration will come to its end of the term. Now, today, we have seen the government really driving the Smart City initiative in Korea, and it has been evaluated as being quite good by scholars. And international scholars a year ago traveled across smart cities to to evaluate. And then when the Korean smart city policies designed by the government were presented, a German scholar was very impressed. And so it seems that the government was able to plan a very good initiative and a very good portfolio for the smart city. So we have taken a very good first step. But in order for this to really succeed, the citizens will have to get involved, and the private sector needs to get involved. And so the private-public partnership will become a very important agenda for the next administration. So, Mr. Jae-young Lee, will the smart city continue in the next administration? And also, can you talk about what kind of policy will be made available to foster the public-private partnership further? So let me hear from you.
감사합니다.
Thank you for the comment on question. So, well, if the smart city project stops, I will be without job. So I hope that the project will continue. In my view, if you look at the former, the policy-driven projects in the past, many of them were domestically oriented, so to speak. So given that kind of history, yes, the smart city project may change over time, but smart city is a really important part of the overall digital transformation, and this is something that's being pursued globally, not just within Korea. So smart city is, I really think, is a irreversible trend. So that's why I believe the smart city project will continue into the future. And essentially, when we think about the smart city, specifically smart city policies, it's been actually around 2 years and about 9 months. So we've heard smart city, we heard the term for a long time, but it's been only about, the policy itself has been around less than 3 years. And actual financing support from the government, that also started only in 2019. So the project, the policy for smart city is still very young, actually. But there has been a lot of talks and discussions about smart city so far. So all these lots of talks and ideas really help to build a broader concept for smart city in terms of the policy. And it's going to require more budgetary support as well. So the government funding was restricted until 2019. So only in 2019, government began investing in smart city project in earnest. So the project essentially has been around only 2 or 3 years. And also, it's a very comprehensive policy. So, for example, civil participation, living lab, or public-private partnership, all these have been pursued. And this kind of innovative city building, it's a dramatic shift compared to the past postures of the Korean government. A similar example, or even more forward-looking example, can be found in India. And India, the initiative might be led by the public sector, and the funding might come from the government a lot. But there are a lot of private sector participants in the Indian case. So we are still at the early stage in the smart city project in Korea. And so we are still discussing a lot of details as to how to pursue this idea. So some projects, some elements that require a big budgetary support, I think these have been identified and confirmed more or less. And there are, of course, some limitations that we are seeing. So personally, We cannot just keep taking preparatory tests. We really need to take a real test and show real results at some point. Because once we show real results, then we can see whether the smart city is really the way forward for our country or not. So it doesn't mean so because of that, we cannot really start a whole lot of industries in this area for smart city. We are now at the stage where we are proving many possibilities for diverse industries in the overall framework of smart city. So we are in a sort of exploratory stage. For more innovation, we need to identify great ideas. We want to build it and we want to show real results. That way we can really propagate these new ideas and new smart city elements across the nation. And once we see the propagation happening, then we can really see real emergence of the relevant industries for smart city. When that happens, many more private sector companies will be able to invest in this area. Right now, I think this is still too early for many private sector companies to make massive investments for smart city. So I know I've been talking for long, but next stage, we are now thinking about industrial policy. What will be the right industrial policies to move forward the smart city or to foster the fourth industrial revolution? And a lot of startups are, for example, fintech or urban tech startups. So we've seen a lot of startups in this area since 2015. And these kind of new types of startups are different from past types of startups. So for example, a test bed space is really necessary for this new type of startups, urban tech or fintech. So now for new startups to be really active and effective, then we need to provide a test bed space for them. So I hope to see the right industrial policy to provide such test bed environment for up and coming startups in Korea. For my last comment, I was actually busy reviewing some data, some documents this morning. When the public and private sectors work together, what could be some obstacles? So that was the document that I was reviewing this morning. So there were some social barriers and institutional barriers and the regulatory barriers according to the document. So in the public sector, for the public sector, their big issue is whether they can really trust the technology that the private sector proposes. So from the public sector's perspective, because they're not sure about the technology, they're a bit hesitant to invest a lot of money in it. From the private sector's perspective, they also have their own concern. They also feel that they are not receiving enough support for the right innovation. So if we can kind of close that kind of gap, then given the fact that we had a lot of success for the past 2 years, we will be able to have a much bigger success going forward.
Thank you very much. That was quite hopeful because you were saying that smart city will continue, and for the scale up to happen, there needs to be trust between the public and the private sectors. We still have some more minutes left before the end of the session. So if there are questions or comments from the floor, we will entertain them. So please raise your hand if you want to ask a question and state your name and affiliation when you do so. So think about your questions. Now, I would like to raise a final theme to think about. it seems that the private sector and the public sector seem to be not seeing things eye to eye in some cases. The public sector will probably want to nurture the smaller and medium companies, but at the same time, the government is distrustful of the potential for sustainability of these companies. So just as Samsung has tier 1 and tier 2 vendors, the Zone 5-1 is being promoted by a large SPC. And basically, it seems that the larger players within the SPC, the LH and the LGCNS, seem to be leading the way. But I think it's also important to have greater collaboration with the smaller players that are involved. So what are some conditions that are necessary for this kind of wider collaboration of the smaller players that are involved to be successful? And LH Corporation has been a key player in the Korean construction market, but with not major construction projects available, I think you will also need new opportunities and models, right? Well, in addition to what you said, Chun-Yu Lee was emphasizing the need to promote public-private partnership through Smart City Initiative. So I think that's a very important aspect. And since the speaker from LGCNS is here, I wonder whether LGCNS is truly a global company when it comes to smart city. And also, is LH a global, world standard company when it comes to smart city? So starting from the early 21st century, LH has always been thinking of developing new cities, and part of that, of course, was the smart city, and we will continue to evolve. And we are very committed to coexist with a variety of players, including the small and medium companies. The Sejong Zone 5-1, you asked whether the small and medium companies' collaboration with the government can be sustainable in this zone. Well, by law, the SPC is required to continue the services that need to be available in the smart city. And of course, within the SPC, the large players, the LH and LGCNS will have to lead the way, but at the same time, the smaller and smaller players who are participating in the SPC need to work with the larger players. Toronto was often mentioned today, and a media report pointed to that case, saying a large conglomerate like Google was unable to continue the project. How can smaller players in Korea continue this initiative? That was the question raised by the journalist. But in Korea, it is very different approach that we are taking, because we are not taking this from a for-profit only perspective. So even if there are some losses, economic losses that might be incurred along the way, the public and private sectors will work together to continue this initiative. I think this is a very important initiative in order to make progress. So it seems that there was a comment from the floor.
지금 저희가 한 7분 정도
So we have about 7 minutes left. So if you can keep your comments or question brief. Hello, I'm from Shinsegae IS, and I have a question to Mr. Jang. So the Korean government seems to be really supporting a smart city project. And a lot of smart city services seem to be for the private sector, actually, coming from the private sector perspective. So it seems to be more about public welfare services. So I'm curious about LG CNS's perspective on this project, because as a private sector company, we need to generate profits. So what is your view on the smart city services as a for-profit private sector services for consumers? Yes, as you mentioned, the profitability of smart city services, that is an important issue for private sector companies. And the public characteristics and the business economics, they all need to go together for successful smart city. So we cannot just emphasize on the public nature of the smart city project. We cannot totally disregard the need for profits for private sector participants. So, but also this is still at an early stage. So we need to keep in mind that this service, the one smart city is in place and it starts running, then the services need to be able to survive. Meaning that if there are really loss-making services, we cannot just keep providing those services in perpetuity. So yes, we need to keep in mind the profitability of their services. So the key consideration is how to identify and develop such profitable and sustainable services at this stage. I think that was a really important point, that we need to think about the right business model. So starting for another session is going to take place here. So we need to actually wrap up the panel discussion. So the previous industrial revolution began with a steam engine, and that created industrial cities. But now ecosystem and ICT is important. We are now at the early stage of the fourth industrial revolution, and this time of around this current revolution is going to culminate in the building of a smart city. Some efforts will be successful, some will not be, and some will tumble down. But I hope that we can see constructive criticism and healthy acceptance of such constructive criticism in this journey. And I hope that the smart city can be the new type of industrial city for our future generation. So in the midst of the pandemic, we were able to listen to speakers from overseas, from the UK and from Taipei. And also we had wonderful speakers from Korea as well. And I hope that today's discussion will pave the way for a better agenda for smart city. Thank you very much.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sang-ho Lee and the panelists. Thank you for your contributions today. Once again, thank you very much for your insights. I realize there are so many very dedicated people working on the Smart City initiative in Korea, and I think, therefore, there is potential for very successful outcomes. Now, this concludes our session on building the smart city through PPP and cooperation. I would like to thank everyone here and also who have joined us online. Thank you very much. Have a good day.